on the weather. Just once, wouldn't it be nice to have a full year go by with no record-setting temperatures? On being a basket case. I am not the type to have emotional breakdowns. Rather, every once in a while, I manage to get my act together and feel moderately stable for a short time. Alright, here's a big one. On preparing the reader for a brilliant new road novel. Disclaimer, this road novel is all about what the narrator feels like during a month on the road in a particular summer. Everything between here and the last page is filler. Yes, important filler, but filler nonetheless. It is fiction only so far as the story of a certain real journey has been enhanced and embellished. It does not claim to have any serious plot other than love and that of a simple journey or vacation, if you will. The fundamental objective has been to relate a story chronologically with no extra designs of suspense besides that which comes with the old "what will tomorrow bring" variety. Or, as it were, what did tomorrow bring kind, which was often the case when the author was too engaged with actual events and adventure to attend to the sometimes ritual of daily record-keeping, in a style one might tag as real realism or actual lifeism. The author has attempted to tell a story that is no more intriguing than the simple sum of its chronological parts. As with life, though gracefully enhanced with the dim in parentheses bullshit, electricity of flashbacks and perhaps for some a premonition or two, this travel tale, the simplest of road fables, is just a small arena for a few things that seemed worth saying, things that seemed worth trying to say nicely, as well as a few things besides that simply had to be said. This sort of amalgam or collage is for this author what life is. And as art and life are sometimes said to resemble each other, I submit this story as both my statement and as my best effort to date in the endless quest to find life more amusing and interesting. Or, I suppose, if art could ever be as spontaneous and photographic as this artist wishes it to seem, then for argument's sake, I will say that the forthcoming words have been summoned by their endless facility in order that life may be documented, so that life may simply be recorded in all its splendor and always absurd lack thereof, so that lives, like the author's one, in all its splendor and always absurd lack thereof, so that lives, like the author's own for one, may have the chance to unfold with a spot of grace before they are doomed to unravel. This story sounds to me like a big fat pile of postcards, though with no perfect postcards to match the message. This story sounds to me like a big fat pile of postcards, though with no perfect photos to match the messages, to supplement the notes. And I guess because actual postcards were sent to actual people during the actual trip, I would guess these were the notes the narrator, author, needed to send to himself, or to the average contemporary fiction reader, perhaps. And no, as someone has already told me, my much fictional account of a trip around the USA does not qualify as actual fiction. Perhaps that's just fine. Perhaps that's just fine, and just as it's supposed to be. Perhaps it's just a somewhat altered account of an actual real-life month. Maybe it's just the story of an actual road tour as told by an actual guy. Maybe it is just what it had to be, and maybe now I'm just doing my damnedest to try and make it sexy, more sellable, of course. Whether life imitates art or art imitates life, as it were, regardless of which is more true than the other, either way, I'm going to need more money than I have, you see, to get through it all. So as selling and selling out are not as opposite to this author as some may argue, are not as opposite to some, excuse me. So as selling and selling out are not as opposite to this author as some may argue, I submit my best effort to date at getting paid to make art. And finally, as it starts to sound as though there's too little distance between me and the main character, Danny. Excuse me. And finally, as it starts to sound as though there's too little distance between the main character, Danny, and the author, me, then imagine these possibilities. Maybe the author is the Abraham character, or maybe it's Ernie that represents the author's true position in the triumvirate. Or if neither of these do, imagine that the author might be a 700-pound middle-aged man who researched the ex-USA story with long-distance phone calls because he's too fat to leave the house and too sentimental about when he was young and thin to run the risk of exposing his present condition. Well, whatever. How about just read it, and do me the favor of not borrowing a copy from a friend. Buy your own copy. I can't imagine they're charging very much for a volume as thin as this one. If you're looking for murder, intrigue, espionage, otherwise just lots of gratuitous sex and violence, then this little guy isn't the one for you. First of all, the action is largely non-violent, and secondly, the sex is limited to just a few reminiscences. Memories the author surmises may be with him forever, and perhaps never eclipsed. Perhaps, but they prove to get eclipsed over time. Alas, I present to you, noble picky reader, the somewhat abstract portrait of the young white guy, a partly Irish, partly other things guy, a dopey artist, a prematurely sentimental tourist, and a small man among others something like him. The imperfect portrait of a huge young country and a few young egos that set out to be entertained by it. A cross, if you will, between the Three Musketeers and Three Men in a Boat. Or maybe a subtle, if not lazy, combination of On the Road and The Tortoise and the Hare. To me it is always a little like... To me it is always... Excuse me. To me it is also like... I'll try again. To me it is also a little like The Owl and the Pussycat. Though instead of a pussycat, we have two bickering young fellas as different as night and day, and instead of an owl, we have, in our narrator, an undernourished turkey. A turkey who likes to make sentences largely because he's a turkey who thinks he might be able to make up for being such an aloof motherfucker if he can just manage to speak to people without having to meet them, without being put on the spot. That's Danny the narrator. The author, you must remind yourself, may be nothing at all like him. That's it. That's the rub. Please enjoy. In parentheses, and let me close with this brilliant bit of paraphrasing. Rumors that I have discovered a comfortable place for myself on this earth have been greatly exaggerated. Sincerely, the sophisticated slacker.